Thank you for tuning in to another episode on the Scouse Article. I truly appreciate you being here. If you can hit that subscribe button, it massively helps. I'm going to get right into it with everything that's going on in the United Kingdom. And the only thing that you need to know, because it affects every single person, is data sovereignty. And the basic idea is very, very simple in that in a digital society, your rights don't mean very much if you can't control the data that defines you. And now, if this is the only episode that you've watched of me or you've just tuned into my channel, you can watch this episode and go back in regards to all the infrastructure and the contracts that I've been sharing, building up to this petition that I've got out there. And I do want to give credit where credit is due. Zach Polanski has shared this petition, although in my opinion, I feel as though it's been shared strategically, because I do believe that a lot of politicians, they haven't moved forward. There's still there's battles going on, like 20th century battles. We've moved on. People think data is just information. It isn't. Data is identity, eligibility, evidence, risk profile, citizenship, and we know increasingly it's permission. And what's happening now in the United Kingdom are entire layers of public infrastructure are being rebuilt quietly, efficiently, and without much public debate, and in a way that could fundamentally change the relationship between the citizen and the state. So let's just stick with data sovereignty, because it's absolutely everything. Because my petition isn't about stopping progress. It's not anti-technology. It's not even anti-government. It's about making sure that the legal framework catches up to the technological reality before decisions are locked in and before the public loses any say in how their data is used. And that is very, very important about how we're moving forward into this future. Okay, so let me slow it down, because this is not something that you vote your way out of. So let me explain exactly what's happening, why it matters, and why this has got to do with the NHS, digital identity, and the future of money. Guys, I've seen the comments. So, the digital pound, so as I say, let me slow it down. If you'd only pay attention, as I say, to the headlines, you're only going to get a fragmented picture. So you're going to hear about the digital pound being explored, the NHS app updated, the digital ID rollout planned, government migrating services to cloud, AI becoming healthcare, payment systems upgraded. Yeah, you'll hear all that. Because as you know, and if you've been following me in the information that I've been sharing, fragmented but joining the dots in regards to the upgrading of the identity layer, looking into the digital ID and the one login and raising questions, and then health data, the NHS app and the federated data platforms. And now we've got the payment layer, so the renewal of the ISO 20022 and the CBDC design. So we've got the infrastructure layer and the public sector, like the cloud migration. So let me slow it down. So individually, each upgrade makes sense, but collectively, they're creating a new kind of governance environment. So one where data determines eligibility, and eligibility is going to determine access. And the shift sounds subtle, but it isn't, because rights are universal. So in the digital world, rights are becoming conditional. So if you start with the NHS, because it's the most emotionally charged, therefore the easiest place for people to misunderstand what's happening. And if you've been following my work, you'll see where I've been putting it out there bit by bit, piece by piece. Once health data is being tied to a verified identity, the question's going to become, what other systems are using that identity? So if you're paying attention, the answer is the gov.uk one login, which I've gone into a great detail about and I've raised questions about, and I've got a response from the ICO, which will be in another episode. But today we're concentrating on data sovereignty, this episode, why it matters in regards to the petition, because the NHS has its own identity login system, the NHS login, and the stated goal is to make life simpler, but the technical outcome is that the identity is becoming universal. So when people are hearing digital ID, they're thinking of surveillance and passports and on the phones, and that's not the interesting part. It's because digital identity is becoming the integration key. So when multiple systems share the same identity spine, they can interoperate. So health data can be linked, tax data, benefits data, immigration status, employment status, financial accounts, bringing us on to eventually the digital pound wallet. And the government does not need to build a central database because it only needs a standardised identity. So once identity becomes standardised, data fusion becomes a policy design. And you've also got the Bank of England renewing the RTGS, which is the real-time gross settlement, the backbone of the financial system. And part of that renewal includes the shift to the ISO 20022, which turns a payment from a simple transfer into a structured data object. So this matters because when payments carry context, then they become easier to govern and they become easier to regulate and easier to filter. And I'm not saying that, you know, something sinister's going on. I'm just telling you, you can have a look at this yourself. So my questions to that would be, who's going to control the capabilities, under what rules and what oversight? Because I think that we can all see in terms of the Cloud Act and under what jurisdictions this is going to sit under. So this is where sovereignty enters the picture, because the mistake that people make when they're thinking about infrastructure is that they imagine it as neutral. But digital infrastructure is not neutral. It doesn't just carry information, it literally structures it. So when you're combining a verified identity layer, a digitized health layer, a structured payment layer, cloud infrastructure layer, you're creating an environment where eligibility can be determined automatically. So the conversation is quite uncomfortable when it's coming to mainstream media and politicians, because they're still behaving as though their main source of like power is Parliament, and that's the main instrument for change. But if voting, if that was, it might have been true back then, but it's becoming increasingly untrue because our children aren't going to vote the way out of this. This is why data sovereignty matters, and it's why it's being very strategically, in my opinion, shared as well by Zach Polanski. But give him his due. He's the only one that shared the petition. He's the only one. So if you want to start tagging in your MPs, if you want to start raising awareness and asking the right questions, maybe ask, no matter who you side with. Because for me, this isn't left or right. But whoever you feel that you can go to, who's been saying no to the digital ID, go and ask them this question. Go and ask them about data sovereignty. Go and ask them if they're willing to back the petition. Because you'll start getting the answers and you'll start seeing, because in a world where now the most important decisions aren't being made in Parliament, especially not in the United Kingdom. Listen, I had someone message me who works in a research community, and obviously they followed me work, they know what I'm trying to put out there, and they told me that the Health Data Research UK, which is a partnership between the government and the Wellcome Trust, is now expected to integrate with the NHS's federated data platform, and that researchers are being told that they'll soon have to deal with Palantir as part of that environment. That's what they're being told. And you see, as I say, there's no public opt-out for this layer, there's no transparency, and because it sits under research ethics framework rather than clinical care, it can operate under different consent rules. You see, and most people are still thinking that the NHS is, that data is just living inside one box, and it doesn't. Even the research layer is separate. It's a separate universe with separate incentives and separate laws. So, and if those layers merge technically before they merge legally, then the public loses sovereignty by default, not by debate. And here's the thing, it's not even, this isn't a scandal. And none of it's illegal either, what they're doing, because none of it is requiring me, like, none of it's conspiracy. It's just how the infrastructure is evolving and nobody is paying attention. I know you guys are, I know we are, I know we're joining the dots, I know we're signing the petition and sharing it, and I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for all the support. But I do believe there are people who have most probably seen it or seen the petition. You're telling me this petition took 5 weeks to be published. Okay, it might always be the time scale, but then you're telling me that nobody has seen it and nobody wants to jump on board and back it. Data sovereignty. We fought for our privacy rights. This is technically a new right that we're having to fight for, one that we're not going to have, one which will give us leverage, and one that's just, I'm just saying, and I'm just putting it out there, we may as well be living in America. This is the last bit of leverage and it's being sold. So, as I say, thank you for following, thank you for supporting. I'm always going to share the information, now a little bit of my opinion, because it's getting to the point where it's like, what more can we do? We're slowly watching it slip away. And when it comes to 2030, 2035, when people are trying to explain how did we get here, I've put it all out there on the table. So when someone's looking to try and explain it all, just come back here and watch all these videos, read all the comments, see all the people that knew, that were on board, that were engaged, that noticed, that knew that everything out there was theatre. And let's just see what happens. As always, thank you very much for tuning in, and I shall speak to you all soon. Take care.